I would suggest in the first 5 years of your career, unless there's something going drastically wrong with your job, maybe do not switch unless you have a very strong reason. No formula across industries or anything, but typically at a mid-level, anything between a 25 to a 30-35% is what a reasonable ask would be on total comp.
A lot of people on LinkedIn, use this particular line to get a lot of likes saying that people don't leave jobs, people leave managers. How have you experienced that in your interactions with candidates?
No, I think I agree. People do leave their bosses, then they leave their jobs. And I'll be honest, I've had a lot of instances where when we hire, if the reporting manager has a poor people repute in the market,
right,
it is very difficult to hire for them. So when there are layoffs and you've lost your job, then obviously you lose the bargaining power in a lot of sense. So in that situation, it is justified to take a salary cut till the time you're getting a role which is good.
Hello and welcome to the AltUni Career Show brought to you by InsideIM.com. Today we have with us Shuvharshika. She's somebody who has over a decade of experience helping candidates get hired by top companies in the country and the world. She has been an MBA from NMIMS. Before that she was an engineer in the IT space. Of course, that's a common combination that everybody in India seems to have. Also, she's focused on financial services as one of the domains which she specializes in. But I'm super excited to listen to the various stories that she's going to tell us about various candidates that she's met and the various companies that she's met. And we are going to cover topics today which are very, very important for professionals, whether they are in early careers or whether they are people who are in their mid-30s, looking to make a transition into better paying jobs and hopefully also more meaningful jobs. Shuvharshika, welcome to the AltUni Career Show. Thank you so much for sparing time and doing this with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Shuvharshika, how many candidates have you interacted with in the last 10 years of your experience doing this?
So interacted with, and this could be like over conversations, over meetings, coffees, discussions, would easily be anything around 3,500 to 4,000 candidates.
Wow, that's like you met a candidate every day in the last 10 years of your life.
So yeah, on and off, I would say it would be anywhere between 3,000 to 4,000 across financial services, across different domains that I've covered. Yeah.
What would be the total number of companies that you may have helped hire as well? Because we are talking, one side is you help candidates get hired. And what would be the number of companies that you would have helped?
So in financial services, there are not too many players because it's a little smaller, restricted space. Yeah. So I would say in terms of clients that I or my team would have successfully placed or worked with would easily be around 400, 450. Right. This would be across everything from large banks to smaller banks to domestic to microfinance to NBFC, the entire gamut of financial services.
Awesome. You meet so many candidates every day. Why do people make a career transition, and when is it justified to make a switch?
So honestly, there's no right answer, there's no formula, but I would kind of break this for junior, mid and senior.
Right.
Okay. And when I say junior, I'm talking about anyone who has started right out of campus, so either an MBA or a CA or whatever the qualification is, to maybe say the first 5 years.
Right.
The mid will be more of 5 to 10, 12 years, and then I would talk about seniors, right? So for the initial group, which is your juniors as I'm calling it, I would really, really recommend people to give their first few jobs a fair option, a decent time to really know what they are doing, to get into the thick of things, to go through the grind and then take a call whether they are liking what they are doing or they are not. What happens more often than not is when we are out of campus, we are also a little impulsive.
Right.
And we are very quick to make decisions. 6 months, we don't like something, we want to jump and do something else and you feel, oh, this is my time to experiment, which is true. But honestly, it takes year and a half to really get into the thick of things and really understand what is it that you're doing and how you're impacting in a job. So I would suggest in the first 5 years of your career, unless there's something going drastically wrong with your job, maybe do not switch unless you have a very strong reason. Right. Or in 5 years, 2 jobs is okay. But in 5 years, having moved around 3-4 jobs, that's a bit much, because that's just showing that you're not able to make up your mind.
And that will have an impact on your future career prospects as well.
Absolutely. It's more about making sure you are growing and there is potential to grow where you are. If you are in a firm and you can sense this maybe a year down the line, that it is such a large firm and the potential to grow, it's because of the scale, maybe it is not as meritorious, right, and you feel there's something else which is a little more meritorious that gives you that option, I think those risks are worth taking. So basically, people who switch jobs every 2 years, 3 years, in the first 10 years of their career, they will make a little more money than their peers who have stuck around.
Right.
But that's only the first 7, 8, 10 years of their career. After that, the people who have stuck around are the ones who will always have better opportunities in the market opening up for them, who will be evaluated for more senior roles seriously. Because after a point, if you've been switching jobs, you are not taken very seriously in the market.
Before we come to the mid-career professionals and the leaders, what do you think of this phenomenon that happened in India over the last couple of years, when there was obviously a lot of VC money and obviously salaries in a lot of sectors, especially in tech, skyrocketed. So at that particular point of time, a lot of people would have gotten these temptations. A young person who's suddenly seeing a pot of gold because of this entire fundraise bit, and I get into it and then suddenly that company is not able to raise the next round, or something goes awry at that point of time. Is there any way for someone to figure this out while they are choosing their job? Because obviously there is a risk that you take when you go to a startup.
So I honestly don't believe that there's anything wrong in riding the wave. So if there is a part of the economy that is seeing influx of fund or growth, exponential growth, there is nothing wrong in being part of that growth story or that sector in that period of time. Yes, it comes with own risk. If I am with a large firm, and today, not that the large firms are not laying off people, right, so there's no guarantee anywhere. But if I'm with a large firm, mentally I'm in a more stable platform, versus if I'm with a startup where either my comp is slightly high, but it could be high because of the stock options, which, well, is there in theory, you don't know if it will materialize or not. But today, the way the sector is, the market is, I think companies like the risk takers. So when I think of, if I'm in that situation, I would suggest in the first 5 years, 7 years of your career, you should take that risk. You should, if you have a good option, see, the role has to be good. More than money, the role has to be good. It has to be an impactful job, right? If your role is good, money again will follow. Take the risk, because even in terms of exit options, today, a lot of companies are more than keen to take on people who have an entrepreneurial thought process, who are risk takers. So it's not like if your company doesn't do well, that's the end of the journey for you. There is a long way, and people appreciate that, honestly.
So what you're saying is that you should not make too many switches in the first few years, but if you get an opportunity like this, you should take it up and obviously stick around doing that.
Yes, stick around. But then if you start doing that switch every 6 months, right, your career after 5 years will not be taken seriously. Nobody would want to hire you.
So now let's move on to the mid-career professionals, people who you said have typically between 5 to 11, 12 years of experience. Obviously now you have spent some time in the industry, you've seen what your sector looks like, you've seen how your peers are doing, and also that is around the time when people have a lot of life changes as well, right? People start getting married, some people start having kids by then. So what are the motivations for a career transition at that particular point of time in life? And when again, why would people want to make that transition? Is it justified? How should one think about it?
I think, as you rightly mentioned, the big difference between the first 5 years and the next, say, 7, 8 years is basically you progressing in your life in general.
Right.
And that affects your decisions a little more. Your decisions, obviously your career moves have to be now a little more thought after, because again, in the first 5 years, if you've made 2, 3 switches, 10, 20 years down the line, people will not look at it, it'll not bother anyone. Right. But in the next 7-8 years, say from 5 to 15 years of career, if you've again continued that trend, that just goes to show that you're not able to make up your mind.
Right.
And you are, there's something which is not really working for you in each of the roles, which is making you look for a job very, very soon. Right. So this is the part where you really start showing serious stability. Right. You start getting into the thick of things. You start being you want to be part of companies where your jobs are impactful. You're making a change, or you're doing something which is so impactful where you're not easily replaceable. That's the agenda for the next, say, 5 to 7 years.
So at that particular experience level, typically what is the kind of hikes that people expect or typically get? How should I think about it?
Say it depends on the role that you are in, even in a particular sector.
Right.
So for example, if you are in more client-facing front-end roles, I think you can demand a little more, because again, you are the one who is the face of the organization, and you are the one who is better known in the industry and the market, and your references are strong. If you are in a role which is more support, middle office, back office, there, given you are not getting as much client face, here your performance speaks for your work, but there's not so much as a market reference about you.
Right.
So here again, the hikes will differ. So honestly, again, no formula across industries or anything, but typically at a mid-level, anything between a 25 to a 35% is what a reasonable ask would be on total comp.
Absolutely.
And the reason I say total comp is if you're moving from a platform that gives ESOPs versus a platform that does not give ESOPs, all those components need to get added up, and you have to do a calculation basis on real money that you are getting here versus the real money you will get in the next place.
One other piece I wanted to check with you is, a lot of people on LinkedIn, use this particular line to get a lot of likes, saying that people don't leave jobs, people leave managers. How have you experienced that in your interactions with candidates? How regular is this occurrence? And also, maybe you might again make a bad decision, right? Like maybe there is a way to improve your relationship with your boss and continue in the job, and not necessarily just say that, okay, now I've had a fight with my manager / boss, so now I just need to make a quick switch somewhere else. So what is your view on this particular aspect?
No, I think I agree. People do leave their bosses, then they leave their jobs. And I'll be honest, I've had a lot of instances where when we hire, if the reporting manager has a poor people repute in the market,
right,
it is very difficult to hire for them, irrespective of what is the compensation they're offering, what is the role they're offering. Because honestly, beyond a certain point, nobody wants to work with difficult managers. It is a very solid fact. But if it's one-off case where your manager is, everybody else is gelling with the manager and everybody is happy, but you are not really, you're not able to kind of, make peace with them, and you're not on the same page, then maybe it's also important to introspect and see where maybe something you are doing which is not working out, and what is it that others are doing. And more often than not, if this is one-off cases and you feel that I don't have a problem with my company, but maybe just with person X, I don't want to work for whatever reason,
right,
there's always a skip level manager. There's always people that you can speak to in the company and say that, why don't you give me an internal movement? Why can't I work in another team and see how it works? And more often than not, if you're a good performer, a company will invest in you and give you that option.
So Shuvharshika, we've spoken about early career professionals, we've spoken about mid-career professionals. Let's come to leaders. These are people who have already been there, done that, leading massive organizations, possibly big teams. They are in a rare stratospheric layer where they've risen to the top, but they also make job changes, right? So what are the motivations for leaders to switch from one organization to another or one role to another? And how should leaders think about job switches at their life stage?
So for leaders, the reasons to look for a job change or opt for a job change are very, very different from the early career professionals to mid professionals. So just to give you some context, so for an early career professional to decide to make a switch, compensation typically would be reason one. Right. For a mid-career profession, it could be reason two, because then as I said, there are a lot of other things But still it will be in the second or the third, at least reasons for you to make that decision. For the senior folks, somebody who's been in the industry for 15, 20 years or more, compensation is maybe in the top 3 or maybe even lower as in terms of their pecking order for a reason to move companies. So what is it that gets them to make that decision? Here, typically somebody who's been in industry for 20 years knows what he or she likes in their job and why he or she is part of that industry that they are a part of. So there's that experimentation and all has kind of settled in, right? So the reason basically could be something as simple as getting an opportunity to do maybe a similar job but at a much larger scale. Scale makes a lot of difference. I have done this in a company of 500 people. I now want to do this in a company of 10,000 people. Scale also means your role becomes larger. Maybe on paper you're still called the same thing, but you are impacting a lot, your job is a lot more impactful. Second, obviously, could be larger role itself. So I am India head, now I get to head APAC. Right? So which is again a reason, why would I say no to it? It's only, it's on the right growth track for me, it's the next step for me. So it's growth, it's scale, it is, and interestingly, it could also be for a few people, while I said that by this time you don't want to experiment a lot, there are also times where you feel I've done this for 20 years. Now I want to do something else in my space. So more often than not, you'll see somebody who's been, say, a business head will say, now I want to really get into the nitty-gritties of what really happens in operations and technology. So I don't want to be head of sales, I want to be the COO of the company. So in telecom and pharma kind of sectors we see, somebody has done distribution in telecom for a very long time, could be heading, you could be in a national distribution kind of role, gets a good opportunity with a very large pharma company and they feel, pharma is the next sunrise sector and that's where I want to be, then they'll make those switches. So basically in the pecking order, compensation is much, much lower.
You helped a lot of people who get laid off. I know you use this sophisticated term redundancies, but I'm saying obviously people have gotten laid off. नौकरी चली गई लोगों की और आपने उनको help किया to get another opportunity and that gave you satisfaction. So any examples of that sort?
Like I said, the roles which have a very happy candidate and a very happy client close, and when we close such deals, those are the most satisfying ones. So one definitely comes to mind is, again, a global bank was looking at a particular skill set. Now this was in global markets, which is treasury and fixed income and the fancier part.
Pretty glamorous jobs.
The glamorous part of banking, which is very niche but really, really well paid, right? So my client was looking for a particular skill set, which is basically trading. Trading again within that is a very, very defined, very niche skill set. So it's not a fungible skill set.
नहीं आप क्या बोल रहे हो, अभी तो पूरा इंडिया जीरोडा पे ट्रेडिंग करता है.
Not that trading. It is not that trading.
I know.
But yeah.
So it's a different scale. With a very sophisticated.
With a very technical, more than sophisticated, very technical skill set. So either you've done it or you're not. वो fungible ज़्यादा नहीं. It's not like I can move somebody on sales, on trading side. तो मुझे trader ही चाहिए role के लिए, right? So there was this requirement from a client, and they were very, very particular of what they wanted and their product offerings on the trading side, things like that. We were scouting for candidates, but again, given this pool, because this pool is so well paid off and they know that they can really demand very high compensations in the market, at times their expectations are unrealistic. So my client was not finding someone worth their salt. Like they were ready to pay, but not so much. So one such instance where I had a very, very capable candidate who was in fact one notch senior to what my client was looking at. My client was looking at a VP level. He was already a director with a much larger reputed global bank. He was based in Hong Kong and his role was made redundant. Also, he and his family were very keen to move back to India. Parents were aging, wanted his daughter to start her college in India and be in India with her and things like that. So he really was like, he decided to kind of come down to India without really getting a job because again, he was a senior guy, so it wasn't very easy. Thankfully, we were able to get in touch with him at the right time when my client was looking for this role. And when my client met him, given he was so brilliant at what he did, and obviously him losing his job had nothing to do with his capability. They were so happy that they up-tiered the role and made it a director band just to hire him. And they were really, really grateful for that hire. So I think cases like these are the ones where you feel you really, really solved a problem on both sides.
Shuvharshika, now coming to a slightly more difficult topic, again connected to people getting laid off. This is also the season where a lot of people have been asked to take salary cuts, etc. And a lot of people who get laid off, who then finally get a job, have also been asked to take salary cuts, etc. In your experience, when is taking a salary cut justified? And if you can give us any example of someone who you've had to kind of coach and say that, hey, look, this is now something that you should take up. It's good for you, but you need to take a salary cut. So if you can give us some color on that.
So when there are layoffs and you've lost your job, then obviously you lose the bargaining power in a lot of sense. So in that situation, it is justified to take a salary cut till the time you're getting a role which is good. It is at least at the same level of what you were doing and in a similar setup, if not larger. If that means you're taking, they call it a haircut of 5, 10%, 15% as well, it makes sense because it's important that you start again. Otherwise, you could be out in the market looking around for 6-8 months, and then you realize that you should have taken this decision earlier than later. Now, the second aspect is taking a salary cut when you are already in a job. Right? So why do I take a cut for another role? Now, I am talking about a candidate who comes with around 16 years of experience in retail asset sales, okay? Again, with one of the larger NBFCs. But somewhere and she's a very, very perceptive business manager, keeps her ears and eyes open, is realizing how things are changing, how the regulator has become so stringent and is keeping such a keen eye on all lending platforms, understands and realizes that, and by virtue of which also realizes that risk and control functions are actually now a lot more enabled, and they drive the business agenda a lot more than just sales and business, right? So she believes that I've done business for enough and more, and it's getting repetitive after a time. So I also need to learn another skill. While I've been always working with control functions as my counterparts, now I want a role there. So she kind of came to us and she said, I am more than keen to look for an opportunity in risk control, but not in business, because business, I know I'll do well here and I'll grow. So when, and I also had a client who really, really believed and appreciated, because also in risk, it's good to have someone coming from business, because they know, what is it that they're losing on when they're saying no to a deal. So it's good to have a well-rounded experience. And as I said, she was such a brilliant leader that they were more than happy to kind of hire her. But they were very sure that she will have to, if the offer was a cut on what she was currently drawing. And the logic was simple. You are in a revenue generating role in your current avatar. If you move to a control functions, I can't change the parity within my organization, because if I'm paying 20% less to my control functions, it's only justified that anyone who joins in that role takes that cut. So it was important for her to understand that, because this gave her an opportunity to do something else, but it came at a cost that she had to take that cut, and which she did. And I think, she's been in that role for 4 years now, and the good thing is today, both the options are open for her. So if she wants to switch back to business, that's always a door open. If she wants to continue in control functions, she can do so.
So Shuvharshika, you were talking about how it's not a good idea to take a lot of career switches early on in your career. Are there any examples that prove this point of yours? Why we should not make a lot of switches? आपके पास कोई example है इसका?
So one comes to mind. We were working for a client which is one of the fastest growing NBFCs, backed by a very marquee investor. They were looking for a very senior role, a CRO role, Chief Risk Officer, which was a highly enabled role. They're growing really fast, so they really needed their risk control functions to beef up. And interestingly, we were obviously scouting a lot of talent in the market for this, looking at a lot of banks and NBFCs and people of similar scale or larger scale, because these guys are growing exponentially, so they'll reach 3x maybe in 2 years. So interestingly, we came across somebody who That way ticked all the boxes for my client, right? 20 years of experience, was already working with one of the larger private sector banks, was taking care of a very large part of their entire retail risk function, and had made those switches early on in the career. So he, in an experience of 20 years, he had been with 11 companies. So it was the 11th company that he was in, and I was basically approaching him to join a 12th one, right? And obviously would have made those 2 years switches early on and would have got that 20-25% hike every 2 years, right? Cost wise, he was a little outpriced in the market, in the sense because of that, you know, he was kind of
earning a lot,
earning more, maybe slightly, not a lot, but I'll say maybe 10-15% more than his peers. But beyond the point, he also realized that he needs to take a cut if he needs to get into the next role, because, well, without that, you know, nothing great would come his way. And another reason for him to make this switch was, this role was based in a city that he wanted to move in for personal reasons. So he was like, fine, I'll take a slight cut on my compensation. You know, I'm ready to kind of explore this opportunity. I presented him to my client, while, again, as I said, he was ticked the boxes, exactly what they wanted. But my client, both the investor and the CEO, were definitely not happy with the fact that he had 11 jobs in 20 years, which on an average meant he was changing jobs every 2 years, and did not give them the comfort that he will stick around. And they said, we'd rather go with somebody who's maybe not as capable or making not as much money, but who in a CXO role shows stability, because that's very important at such levels.
Shuvharshika, you meet all these candidates every year. So how do these candidates keep themselves upskilled? As you know, we run an upskilling platform called AltUni, and we help a lot of early career professionals get skills that will make them more employable. Clearly, a lot of traditional schools, colleges, you know, are slightly behind the curve in helping people become actually employable. And AltUni does, you know, fill that particular gap. So wanted to understand, you know, when you meet these 25-year-olds or 32-year-olds, what do they do to ensure that they are good enough for the next job? Because while you might be doing a lot of work on your job, if you want to make a switch from one industry to another, or if you want to make a leap into something new and exciting that's coming in, then you also need to have some other skills beyond what you are doing in your job. So what have you seen people do the most which has actually worked in terms of upskilling?
I think the upskilling courses that a platform like yours offer these days, I think these have really changed the way people earlier looked at quote-unquote certifications, right? Earlier certifications were something that you do which is in theory makes you a little more, maybe a better option to pick the next job. But more often than not, a lot of companies did not take that very seriously. And secondly, it did not change the company's experience when they interacted with you. So in the interview, they did not feel a huge difference whether you did that certification or you didn't. But today that has changed. Today, I think the courses that are coming in are like, you can really sense in your conversations with them that these guys know this aspect a lot better. They have some kind of in-depth, hands-on knowledge in this space, which obviously makes them a lot more employable. And I think early on your career, you should make sure whatever comes your way, you have to grapple for knowledge, whether it comes through work, whether it comes through courses, whether it comes through networking, whatever it is, wherever you're getting knowledge from, you should just get it.
Yeah, just a small plug from my side when she said that hands-on experience is something that people have. One of the things that we have done is that every single person who does a course with us gets a chance to work on a project with an employer. Even before they have actually joined that employer, they get a chance to work. Even if they don't get a job, they get a chance to work with an employer. And that essentially is the difference between theoretically learning something and getting a certification versus actually getting some hands-on experience. So thanks for bringing that up. Just wanted to point that particular piece out as well. Awesome, Shuvharshika. This has been a great conversation. Guys, we'll be back in another episode with Shuvharshika where we'll discuss a new topic. The next time we are going to talk about how are you going to negotiate your salaries.